Welcome everybody to episode number 6 of the Soccer Coaching Theory podcast. Today I got a hot topic for you. It is all about rondos. Are they useful? Are coaches making a mistake by using rondos? Can we prove they work? Do they not work? And what is a rondo in itself? I can't wait to talk about all this stuff with you right now. So let's just jump right into this. So first of all, what is a rondo? So we kind of back in the day grew up knowing that a rondo was maybe 6 versus 2 defenders in the middle in a circle. And nobody moved. They just stood there and they played the ball 1 touch, 2 touch, whatever it was. And if you split the defenders, they stayed in the middle. So that's a really old school definition of a rondo for me. Because that rondo actually for me comes with very little benefits. It has some benefits, and the more you can increase the variability, maybe it's 3 defenders, maybe it's whatever it is, but it comes with limited benefits. So other rondos, in my opinion, we have to kind of get in this conversation of what actually is a rondo. Is it a positional exercise that involves possession? You could look at Guardiola's like positional rondo with 4 versus 4 plus 4. You have 2 center mids in the middle. It's positional specific. That's a rondo. For me, that's a rondo. It's a totally different exercise than just a circle with 2 players in the middle, right? It's completely different now. So there's all sorts of variability in these rondos too. Is it 1 touch? Is it mandatory 2 touch? So now you have to adjust your body position. You have to scan in a different way. Is there transition involved in the rondo? Is it if the defense wins, are we counter pressing? Is there a direction in the rondo? If the defenders win the ball, do they score on goals outside the grid? Who knows? We could keep going on with this, but I am not discussing in today's podcast a old school 6 versus 2 rondo. And I think that's like a lot of the people who are against rondo training, and they make all these points about representative game design and everything, and it's not the real game and it's not real distances and all that kind of stuff. In my opinion, they're probably referring to an old school rondo. Now, in my personal way that I use rondos, I build when the kids where I am, a lot of the kids will come off the bus and they'll come to the field and they'll walk on the field and will be ready for training. Their bodies aren't ready for training at that point, right? So either do we do a passing exercise, do we do a physical warm-up through cones with hurdles and speed rings or whatever it is that you want to do. Do we do that stuff? Is that the actual game? It's getting the body ready, but it's not the actual game. Should I spend 15 minutes on some physical activity that's not the actual game where there's no decisions being made? I'd rather not do that. So can I start with maybe a 4v1 or 1-touch rondo? Maybe it has transition in it, maybe it doesn't, where the kids aren't running like crazy because their bodies aren't ready to run like crazy. We didn't warm up. And then, so they're getting meaningful touches on the ball, they're playing quick, they're manipulating time and space, whatever it is. But it's good. Compared to what? A physical warm-up? What if we go, the rondo, 1 touch, blah, 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 and then we go into a 60-second physical output, and then we come back to the rondo for another 3 minutes? Here's my point. I was listening to one of the coaches in Europe, and he had some really, really nice things to say, but everything he did was the real spaces on the field, and everything was completely, in his opinion, completely to context of the 11v11 game. It was real. He only had, say, a 14-minute physical warm-up before he got into basically exercises on the big field with large numbers. I don't really buy into that. I'm not going to say that he's wrong. It's his way of training. I can't say that he's wrong. But those 13 minutes, I would expand that out to 20 minutes, and I would have rondos built in. That's just me. And I'm going to get much more into why about the Rondo. So before we actually take sides of would you not, you have to have some sort of academic theory that you're applying to the logic behind why or why not the exercise is useful. I used to be a proponent of like a cognitive processing theory, but now I'm much more in line with the theory of ecological dynamics. And it made a massive impact on the way I view my exercises. I haven't scrapped what I do, but I made modifications to what I do based upon academic theory, ecological dynamics, into my practice session design. So one of the things about ecological dynamics is you don't want to split things into little pieces. But I want to take the viewpoint that Rondo is not splitting it into a little piece. I know that you're not shooting on a big goal and all these kind of things, and it can have a direction if you want it to have, and we'll talk about that later. But in parts of that Rondo, it is the whole. When three players are pressing me, and I have maybe two middle players, and I have players on the sides of me, I have to figure out how. And it's not like Rondos are always overloads. Those three players could be in an area where I'm outnumbered 3-2, 3-1. How am I going to solve that problem in that little area to keep that ball moving, to keep that possession going? And then we're still working off of principles. You could call it a sub-principle, but we attract the defenders over to hit them where the space is where they left, right? So that attraction, that sub principle, there's still principles of play in rondos. So it's just another step in, is it game representative? Does it have principles? Of course it does. It has sub-principles, it has principles, of course. Now, it can be position specific, and there's so many things in a rondo. You're looking at, let's just take Guardiolas because everybody knows it, the 4-4 plus, 4v4 plus 4. You could have two center mids, which what he does. And those players, principles, they have to play in between players, right? They have to find those spaces in between players. Those are the center mids. That's position specific. They have to take up those body positions. They don't want to run through each other's passing lanes. Now, one of the things in Rondo that nobody talks about is familiarity with certain rhythms of passing in those small areas. Because there's no 50-yard one-touch ball solution. You see in games all the time, players who aren't comfortable in finding solutions in small spaces, what do? They thump the ball forward 70 yards on their first touch. And for me, it shows, okay, maybe it was warranted in that part, but also maybe they didn't understand the rhythm, that maybe they could have bounced a ball off a teammate who was only 4 yards away, who could bounce it back to them first touch, and they were not comfortable in that rhythm. And I saw this all the time when Barcelona played Real Madrid, right? Oh my God, you could see the rondos, ping, 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 ping. Now, it didn't always have to go forward, right? It goes sideways, back, sideways, back. And then eventually that penetrating ball is on. Maybe that long ball to switch the field is on. But it was those 3 or 4 little passes with that rhythm and that body position that they were so comfortable in. And did they have to be taught? Now, oh my God, because we didn't practice those long balls for the first 30 minutes of practice to switch. No, they see the field. They see that they drew the opponent in with the shorter passes, and that opened up space somewhere else. And positionally, they had players ready in those spaces. That's why Guardiola would never let the winger run to the come into the penalty box. If the ball was on the right side of the field, the left wingers had to stay wide, right? Because we draw them in, then we hit them on the other side of the field. Xavi, his comments about Rondo, I mean, word for word, go look him up on the internet. He says, in the first 3 months, you don't understand what the Rondo is. He's talking about 3 months. He's not talking about 2 rondo exercises where a coach is looking. And no, he's talking 3 months. He doesn't understand. After 6 months, you start to get more out of it. And then after a year, you get more. He says rondo has everything in it that you need in the game, right? And that's not my words. That is Xavi's words. And what I'm trying to tell you is that matters, because we can talk about a check for understanding. We could talk about how you evaluate if development is happening and if learning is happening. Now, it's not an easy thing to just watch a training session and say that learning is happening, right? You could perform something the right way, but hey, fix your plant foot on the way that you're passing the ball, and they fix it. Great. It doesn't mean that performance is developing there. It means you fix the technique, right? So my whole purpose here is I'm going to lead into this a little bit later of how do you measure development? Because it's something that is very difficult because you're talking about a very dynamic environment in the sport of soccer, which is chaotic, and over time you'll be able to see development. But so they always talk about what is a coach willing to sacrifice, because not everything to be fully game representative is the 11v11 game, right? And for me, honestly, it makes no sense. Who's going to go to practice every day and do the 11v11 game after your physical warm-up is done? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. A, players are going to lose interest. B, the workload is much too high. C, injury is something that you always have to keep in mind. It just makes zero sense to me. That's to me. So think about this as well. And this is a massive point. Say maybe your striker hits a left-footed volley in those 11v11 realistic games once a month. Is once a month okay to practice a left-footed volley if you're a little deficient in it? Come on. It's not realistic to me. So that's kind of what I'm saying, though, with solutions in small spaces. My first, say, 25 minutes of training that's combined with the physical, and they're practicing solutions in small spaces that they would never really get a ton of that in a bigger game, for me, that's massive. And let's not even consider, we have to consider the fast players, who are the strikers, who are the wingers. When are they ever going to be in those really tight spaces and not rely on their speed, right? Now they have to rely on really coming up with nice little combination solutions in these small area. See, I'm not just going to call them Rondo. I like to call them small area possession and positional and Rondo type of activities. And that means a lot to me. So if you really want to talk too about, hey, it has to be game realistic for these guys to get stuff out of this, and it has to have well, how about beach soccer? Ronaldinho. Nobody understands the way I dribble on the grass and beat opponents at Barcelona because it's from the experience I had on the beach. How different is the beach from the real game? You can't run with the ball really on the beach. You can, but you can't. You have to have so many unique ways and ideas, and your action capabilities are vastly different than anything you're going to do on a turf field. But still, there was a massive transfer of knowledge there. Come on. We could say the same about futsal. Severe differences, but there's a transfer of skill. Positional rondos, right? These things are, in my opinion, that to say, hey, rondos come up so short because they don't represent the real game. The players aren't looking 70 yards down the field. Hey, there's no direction. The defenders aren't trying to press you in a certain way. I said the defenders are pressing you a certain way. If the defenders know what they're doing, heck yeah. If you're playing these rondos, you could build up in sophistication. One guy in the middle, two guys in the middle, three. When I say guys, I'm guys on the attacking team who are in possession, right? Maybe it's 5 defenders in the middle, 3 who are on the team with the outside players. It's a 5 versus 5 plus maybe 5 with 3 of those in the middle. Now those players in the middle have to understand where the spaces are, their proper body position. Maybe you give them free play in the middle. They combine, get 1-2s off of each other, run through, dribble. But my point is this. Those 5 players are going to try to press. When that ball gets to maybe it's a rectangular grid, when it gets to maybe the corner of a rectangle, they're coming one direction to pressure you. That's the bottom line. They know if they press you in that corner, that's one direction they're coming. It doesn't have to be fully representative. Trust me on that. So it's still the whole, but the whole in a different way, right? So here's what I'll say: that that Rondos do come with some action capabilities that are not present. I get that, but it's still okay. If I look at, say, my first 20 players, my top 20 players, and I run a huge program, and maybe there's 100 guys in the program, and we practice 6 hours a day in different shifts, whatever it is. My top 20 guys are the best guys at these types of small area rondo positional training sessions. They're the best. They understand how to move the ball. They're technical, they're smart, intelligence levels, very good, making good decisions. Um, you can see that. And that just shows me there's a transfer there between the real game, because they're also the best players in the 11-11. So if they're the best players in those other games and all these rondos and the 11v11, it shows me personally that there is a similarity here. So it reminds me of, I remember we were in the national finals, and I had a player from an English academy, a professional academy, maybe from the U19s, and maybe wasn't used to all the really in close work that we did with all these rondos and positional games. And it came to the end of the season after about 5-6 months of training, and we get to a really high pressure situation and maybe the national semifinal, and here he is in these tight spaces at half field, and I just swear he was going to knock the ball down the channel 40 yards for our striker to hold the ball up and make something happen from the corner. I don't know, whatever, right? But here he is combining with the Brazilian players, little 3 or maybe 5 or 6 yard passes, maybe puts together 3 top passes in tight areas, and then he plays a ball back to our center back and we switch the field. I was like, that right there was my observation of the last 5-6 months, had a direct impact on what that player perceived and his action capabilities, what he attended to, where he put his attention, where he put his vision into a real match where he did something that really was a high level, helped us keep the ball under pressure, switch the field, and ended up creating a good movement on goal from that movement. So for me, sometimes you have to look at your real life experiences as well. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I would say for the last maybe 8 years, really been working on my methodology and connecting that academic theory to training session design. I always kind of was leaning in my directions, but I felt that in the last maybe 8 years, we've taken a real good step forward. And I could see it in the development of the players. So ultimately, we don't all have to, as coaches, agree on what methods work, on what methods that you want to use, because it's hard to see, again, watch an exercise and say that learning or no learning has occurred. It's very difficult to do that. There's no data, there's no metrics that's really going to say that. And you could say that in education as well. I mean, we've made so many standardized tests, but how do you really measure a kid's intelligence? This is not easy stuff. But for me, I remember the martial arts as an example. We went through these phases where there's so many martial arts schools, and I swear I liked martial arts a lot when I was younger. And you could go to a school and you could look at the practitioners, and I would go and maybe spar at some of these karate schools, and the guys aren't that good. That some of the schools, nobody's any good. You're just like, okay, not very. And then you go to a school once in a great while, and I remember going to one. It was called Calazans, and every single student was excellent. And I'm talking 60-year-old women to 60-year-old men to 18-year-old kids. They were all excellent. And for me, what does that say? It says that the method, whatever you're doing, it's working. And I remember taking a class in college, It was an environmental studies class, and it was just talking about the effects of basically the effects of modern living and everything that we do on the environment. And I remember the teacher saying, probably the best way though to measure the effects sometimes is to go into people who lived in the community over the years and say, how's it changed? What have you noticed? Because you've been living here for 65 years. What have you noticed? He said that's a really, you cannot not ask that question. So kind of what I'm saying is, if you go to wherever you want to go to, Sporting Lisbon, Ajax, whatever you want to do, or maybe it's a local club who produces great talent, there's something they're doing that's working. Whether it's and I hate to say this, like, winning is a poor. If you're just bringing in the best players, winning is not necessarily the measuring stick here. I'm talking about apples for apples. You're developing players in this one community where you're not dealing with, the world. You're not going and taking these kids from all over the world and bringing them in because they're special. But if you're really developing people, there's something to your methods, something you're doing right. So from my experience, um, I think variability is key. Create all these new environments for these kids, these these adults, whatever you coach, whatever level you coach. Create all these different environments. So when they step in there, are they counter pressing in these rondos? Maybe. Or is the defenders going to goal? Maybe. Is it one touch? Is it two touch? Is it transitional? Is it different shapes? Is it position specific? Whatever it is, keep changing it. Keep that variability, because I think it forces players to continually come up with these new solutions and these new action capabilities, and to perceive these things in different ways. And I think that's really, really, really important. So hopefully, um, you enjoyed my my view on Rondo training, and it made sense to you. To be fair, I listened to, I forgot the name of the show. It was a coaching, uh, of soccer coaching. We'll call it a football coaching show from England, where they took on the same topic, and the guys were really, really knowledgeable guys, and everybody had these distinct opinions. But this is why I think that, like, coaching federations is a dangerous thing. Like, don't tell coaches that you can't do rondos and that it's not good because of this or because of that. If you choose not to do them because it doesn't align to your academic theory, or it doesn't align to your whatever you should be basing it on something. Well, that's fine, but don't tell them that they can't do it. Unless you come up with the study of all studies that show there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever, I think that coaches should be allowed to to develop the methods that they feel are appropriate for the environments that they're in. And to take that away from a coach, I think these conversations are massive. They're very important to have with coaches. But by no means would I ever want to say, and I'll give you an example, like the guy in his name was Carl, the guy over in Europe, who said he never would do a rondo, right? It has to be more game representative, all this kind of stuff. I'm not going to say, Carl, you're wrong. That's the way that you train. And I really love some of the ideas that this guy has. Like, very, very, very good ideas that I'm going to steal a few of these. I'm going to borrow a few of his ideas. I really liked it. But I'm never going to agree with him on a 13-minute physical warm-up and then go straight into the proper distances on a real field. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I could make an argument, like I just did, of why. You can learn how to exploit time and space in rondos. And really, the principles are there, and I'm sorry that soccer is about understanding, time and space, and eventually your exercises do have to, your methodology kind of has to have principles in it. It has to be based on principles. Now, the principles, the players don't need to know what those are, by the way. They don't have to say, Coach, the attacking principles are these 16 things. Nah, it doesn't help them. Because it just doesn't help them, in my opinion. They have to be able to step on the field and know, if it's really crowded in this area and I don't have any options, I need to focus my attention elsewhere and look to where it's not crowded, look where I can exploit time and space and get the ball there, and that will give our team a better chance to score a goal. Because at the end of the day, this is about scoring goals, right? And other guys on the field need to be saying, okay, as we're going to score that goal, are we protecting ourselves for the counterattack, or do we commit too many players forward? Do they really need to know it's defensive balance, right? I don't think they do. They just have to understand that, hey, we have people who are in spaces that can exploit us badly if we lose the ball. They have to be able to recognize that. And for me, that's not about memorizing 20 defensive principles of play. It is not about recognizing 20 attacking principles of play. When Giovinco, I give this example all the time, when I watched him at Toronto FC, got off the plane from Italy, couldn't speak a word of English, they had 16 attacking principles of play that they were preaching all the time, that coaching staff in Toronto. I sat through a presentation on it at the convention. Do you think Giovinco knew one of those 16 attacking principles of play? He couldn't even speak English at that point. No, but he was the best player on the field. And hopefully that makes sense, because the information is not in language. It's what Giovinco perceives, and it's based in that real time information, based on him not perception. I'm going to call it perceiving. Based on him perceiving, right? There is action capabilities that open and close, and they emerge in real time. And Giovinco understands how to exploit time and space. Doesn't need to speak English. All he has to do is to carry out the way that he's played this game of understanding how to exploit time and space. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the show. I'll be back soon with another episode. Take care.